You are sentenced to 290 years. Go to hell!
No, please.
In a packed courtroom in Austin, Texas, a complete silence fell. The eyes of the press, the eyes of the jury, and the eyes of a devastated family were all fixed on Judge Raymond Ortiz. For weeks, they had listened to horrific testimony, seen indescribable photos, and tried to comprehend the incomprehensible. Now, the moment of reckoning had arrived. Before the judge stood Pamela Turpin, the 32-year-old mother, wife, and executive who seemingly had it all. But the jury had seen behind the mask. The judge delivered the sentence, 290 years in prison. But he didn't stop there. In a stunning departure from judicial protocol, Judge Ortiz leaned forward, looked directly into her eyes, and with cold, righteous anger, uttered words that would echo in Texas judicial history, "Go to hell." Mrs. Turpin, how can a mother, supposedly the symbol of protection, reach this point of absolute condemnation? How can a $1.2 million home in an upscale suburb transform into the stage for one of the most heinous family annihilations in state history? This isn't a story about a monster who broke into a home in the middle of the night. This is a story about the monster who lived inside the monster who cooked dinner, helped with homework, and posted pictures of the perfect family on social media. This is the story of Pamela Turpin, and how her sick pursuit of perfection led to the destruction of everything she loved, or claimed to love. If you're watching this, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our upcoming investigations into shocking cases like this. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We're curious how far this tragic Austin story has reached. Before January 24, 2020, the suburb of West Lake Hills in Austin was the definition of the American dream, a quiet community known for its excellent schools and low crime rates. And at the heart of this community lived the Turpin family, from the outside. They embodied everything one could aspire to. The house itself was an architectural showpiece, 4,500 square feet of contemporary design, massive windows overlooking meticulously landscaped gardens, and a backyard pool where the children raced in the summer. The gourmet kitchen was where Dr. Michael Turpin loved to cook elaborate Sunday dinners for the family. Family photos adorn the hallway in chronological order, telling the story of a growing family through birthdays and vacations. A visual timeline that came to a sudden, horrific stop on January 24. The head of the family, Dr. Michael Turpin, 34, wasn't just a successful doctor, he was a rising star in his field. He was the youngest ever chief of pediatric surgery at Austin Memorial Hospital. Colleagues described him as brilliant yet humble, a man with precise surgical skill and a compassionate heart that calmed the fears of sick children. His research into minimally invasive surgical techniques was being published in leading medical journals. But his work wasn't confined to Austin. Every year, Michael traveled to Central America on a humanitarian mission, performing surgeries on children with congenital heart defects. He would learn key phrases in Spanish just to make the children smile before surgery. He was a man who carried pictures of his children in his wallet and spoke of them with pride during every break. He seemed to have achieved the perfect balance between a demanding career and a fulfilling family life. But these humanitarian trips, as investigators would later discover, were a source of growing tension in his marriage. And beside him was Pamela Turpin, 32. She met Michael while they were undergrads at the University of Texas. He studied pre-med, she studied business. Friends from the period described them as an irresistible, perfectly matched pair. She, with her outgoing personality and ambition, he, with his quiet intensity. They married after he graduated from medical school, and Pamela worked hard to support them financially during his residency, clawing her way up to become a marketing director at a prominent tech software company. Pamela had meticulously cultivated the image of the supermom. Her colleagues at work described her as meticulously organized, ambitious, and always in control. These qualities served her well in the corporate world, but they may have contributed to creating a suffocating environment at home. Her social media accounts were an art gallery of family perfection, color-coordinated holiday Photos, children's achievements front and center. And captions extolling the joys of motherhood and marriage. This stark contrast between her public image and her private actions would become a central theme of the prosecution's case, highlighting the dangerous facades that can mask deadly intentions. And the children were the jewels in this perfect crown. Olivia, 8, had inherited her father's compassionate nature and her mother's confidence. She was a natural leader among her third-grade classmates. Her ballet instructor described her as disciplined beyond her years, recently selected for a solo in the school recital, a performance she would never give. Her room was a sanctuary for a curious mind, shelves lined with books from science encyclopedias to fantasy novels, a desk covered in meticulous drawings of animals, and walls adorned with ribbons from swimming competitions. Her journal, found under her pillow, revealed her dreams of becoming a doctor like her father or a marine biologist. Dreams brutally cut short by the person who was supposed to nurture them. Noah, 7, was the family's athlete. His room was filled with soccer trophies and posters of his favorite players. His coach described him as a natural on the field, with great team spirit. His school reports indicated a bright, energetic boy who sometimes struggled to sit still but showed remarkable focus when topics interested him, especially science and math. On his desk sat a half-completed Lego spacecraft, the instruction manual open to page 23, a poignant reminder of a project that would remain forever unfinished. The day before his death, Noah had been excitedly planning his science fair project, a model showing how the heart pumps blood, inspired by conversations with his father. And Lucas, 5, the youngest, had just started kindergarten. His teacher described him as a curious explorer who asks why more than any child I've ever taught. His artwork showed exceptional creativity for a child his age. Lucas had recently learned to read and was proud of his new ability to sound out words in the bedtime stories his father read to him each night. In his cubby at kindergarten, there was still a clay handprint he had made as a Christmas gift for his parents just weeks before, alongside a crayon drawing of his family, 5 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. That innocence, that drawing of a happy family unit, would later be displayed during the trial as a stark testament to the brutality of their end. The Turpin children were known in the neighborhood as polite and well-adjusted. Neighbors recalled seeing Michael teaching Noah how to throw a baseball on weekends, or Pamela helping Olivia with her ballet positions in their large picture window. They attended community events together. Michael volunteered at health fairs, Pamela served on the PTA. Halloween photos from just 3 months prior showed a perfect family, Michael as a wizard, Pamela as a witch, and the children as their familiars, an owl, a cat, and a frog. These public displays of family unity made the later revelations all the more shocking. Acquaintances struggled to reconcile the image of devoted parents with the horrifying reality that would emerge during the investigation. But behind these closed doors, not all was perfect. Investigators began to dig, and a more complex picture emerged. Interviews with close friends revealed that Michael had been concerned about Pamela's increasing control over family decisions and finances in recent months. His mother recalled a phone call just 2 weeks before the massacre, where Michael mentioned he felt watched all the time, but he quickly changed the subject when she pressed for details. Pamela's assistant at work noted she had seemed unusually distracted and was taking private calls behind closed doors in the week leading up to the killings. A departure from her normally transparent management style. One neighbor reported hearing what sounded like an argument from the Turpin home about a week before the murders but thought nothing of it at the time. These subtle cracks in the facade, initially overlooked, would eventually align with the evidence of Pamela's discovery of her husband's infidelity and her methodical planning for revenge. On January 24, 2020, in the dark, early hours of the morning, this perfect world collapsed. At 4:32 a.m., the 911 emergency line rang. The Austin dispatcher noted that the caller's voice was fluctuating unnaturally between hysterical crying and eerie calm. "My family," she said between sobs, "they're all dead. There's blood everywhere." She told the dispatcher an intruder had attacked her family and hit her on the head. The dispatcher kept Pamela on the line, following protocol, asking her to check if her family members showed any signs of life. Pamela's initial response, "I can't go back in there. I just can't," seemed at first like the natural reaction of a traumatized survivor. But prosecutors would later reinterpret this as her reluctance to lie directly about checking for pulses she knew wouldn't be there. The first police cars arrived 5 minutes later, at 4:37 a.m. They found Pamela sitting on the front porch steps in her nightgown, stained with what would later be confirmed as her husband's blood, pressing a kitchen towel to her head. Officers Jason Mendes and Sarah Carpenter were the first to enter the home. They entered cautiously, weapons drawn, still operating under the assumption that an intruder might be present. Officer Mendes's body cam footage would later be played in court, showing the methodical progression through the silent house. A deadly silence. They reached the master bedroom. There, they found Dr. Michael Turpin, soaked in a pool of blood, lying on his back with multiple stab wounds to his chest and neck. The footage captured Officer Mendes's shocked gasp as he checked for a pulse, found none, and radioed, "We have one adult male deceased in the master bedroom." They continued the search. They moved to the children's rooms. In each room, they found the same horrifying scene. Each child in their own bed, lying on their back, the covers pulled up to their chests. Each with precisely placed stab wounds, seemingly inflicted as they slept. Officer Carpenter's body cam recorded her momentary breakdown upon discovering 5-year-old Lucas. Her voice cracked as she reported, "Third child deceased. He's just a baby." Crime scene technicians arrived within the hour and began the painstaking process of documenting and collecting evidence from what was quickly recognized as one of the most disturbing family annihilation scenes in Austin's history. The lead technician, Gabriela Morales, immediately noted several anomalies that contradicted the home invasion narrative. First, no signs of forced entry at any door or window. The multi-million-dollar home was secure. The sophisticated security system had not registered any breaches. Second, no drawers pulled open or valuables disturbed. Nothing appeared to be stolen. And most tellingly, what sent chills down the investigators' spines, the murder weapons. They were a set of kitchen knives from the family's own knife block. They were found clean and returned to their proper place in the kitchen. In 23 years of service, Morales later testified, "I have never seen a home invader clean their weapons and put them back in the block." These details alone were enough to shift the focus. This was not a random act. This was something personal, methodical, and terrifying. Blood spatter analysis revealed patterns suggesting the perpetrator had moved deliberately from room to room, spending considerable time with each victim rather than acting in a panicked haste. The precision of the fatal wounds each victim stabbed directly in vital areas suggested someone with knowledge of human anatomy, or someone who had researched lethal attack points. And most horrifyingly, the children appeared to have been killed in order of their age. Olivia first, then Noah, then Lucas. It was ritualistic. Meanwhile, Pamela Turpin was transported to Austin Memorial Hospital. In a cruel twist of irony, this was the same hospital where her husband worked as a pediatric surgeon. She was taken there for treatment of her head wound and for observation. The attending physician, Dr. Lauren Reynolds, would later testify that Pamela's behavior struck her as bizarre for someone who had just lost their entire family. She asked about her condition repeatedly, Dr. Reynolds noted in her report, but she never once asked about funeral arrangements or expressed grief about her family. Then came the critical examination, the wound itself. It was superficial, requiring only 5 stitches. And its location was on the right side of her scalp near the crown. This location, doctors noted, is difficult for an assailant to target but very easy for self-infliction. This observation, initially just a note in a medical file, would become the foundational clue that would eventually unravel Pamela Turpin's carefully constructed narrative. At the scene, medical examiner Dr. Victor Ramirez noted the same thing. In his first official note, he wrote that the laceration appears clean and linear. characteristics more consistent with self-infliction. While Pamela was being treated, investigators began the grim process of notifying next of kin. Michael's parents, retired teachers living in San Antonio, collapsed upon hearing the news. Pamela's mother, her only surviving parent, flew in from Chicago that evening. The couple's close friends expressed disbelief, repeatedly telling investigators that the Turpins seemed like the perfect family with no obvious enemies. But veteran homicide detective Nathan Anderson, with 17 years of experience, wasn't buying it. He was assigned as lead investigator. By sunset on that first day, the inconsistencies were piling up. No forced entry. Precise wounds. Cleaned weapons. And a suspicious wound on the sole survivor. Anderson ordered a protective detail placed on Pamela, ostensibly for her safety, but increasingly to monitor her movements. He wrote his first note questioning her story that evening. Suspect's account contains multiple inconsistencies. Head injury appears staged. Need to check digital devices and financial records as soon as possible. That single notation would be the beginning of a meticulous investigation that would ultimately expose one of the most calculated family annihilations in Texas criminal history. These public displays of family unity made the later revelations all the more shocking. On the morning of January 25, just 24 hours after the discovery of the bodies, Detective Anderson sat across from Pamela Turpin in interview room 3. Ostensibly, the goal was to gather more details about the alleged home invasion. Anderson, known for his conversational interview style, deliberately projected sympathy and concern. "I understand how difficult this must be, Mrs. Turpin," he assured her, "but even small details might help us find who did this to your family." During this 3-hour, videotaped interview, Pamela added several new details absent from her initial statement. She claimed the intruder wore a ski mask, spoke with a deep voice, and smelled of cigarettes. These embellishments, prosecutors would later argue, represented Pamela's attempts to shore up her fabricated story as she sensed the investigators' skepticism. Anderson observed her behavior with a trained eye. He noted what he termed performative grief. She would cry at appropriate moments but quickly regain her composure when discussing logistical matters like funeral arrangements or insurance policies. Most tellingly, when Anderson deliberately misstated details about the children's injuries, Pamela failed to correct him, suggesting she was avoiding acknowledging specific knowledge about the wounds that only the killer would possess. When asked about the family's evening routine before the massacre, Pamela made a fatal mistake. She described preparing hot chocolate for the children as a special treat before bed. Without knowing it, she had just confirmed what toxicology would soon reveal: the delivery method for the sedatives. Meanwhile, other teams were working tirelessly. The medical examiner, Dr. Victor Ramirez, delivered the report that was the first nail in Pamela's coffin. The preliminary toxicology report confirmed that all 4 victims had significant levels of zolpidem in their systems, a prescription sleeping medication. The doses far exceeded therapeutic levels. The children's stomach contents revealed traces of hot chocolate, an unusual drink for a warm January night in Texas, suggesting they had been given the medication hidden in a sweet drink before bed. And most importantly, Dr. Ramirez confirmed his assessment of Pamela's head wound. He wrote, unequivocally, "The wound exhibits characteristics consistent with self-infliction. It appears this wound was created to support a false narrative of an assault by an intruder." At the same time, the digital forensics team was working to recover deleted data from Pamela's devices. And what they found is what turned the case from suspicion to horrifying certainty. Lead analyst Marcus Wong discovered that Pamela had conducted numerous and disturbing internet searches in the 2 weeks leading up to the murders. These were not casual searches. They began on January 12, just hours after what investigators believe was the moment she discovered the affair. Michael's phone records showed she had accessed his text messages with Dr. Rebecca Palmer that evening. Her searches changed radically. Instead of social media browsing or work-related research, she began intensive searches for undetectable poisons. How much sleeping pill is lethal? Zolpidem overdose. Knife placement for quick death. How to make murder look like home invasion. Pamela thought she was smart. She regularly cleared her search history and used private browsing modes. But as Marcus Wong explained to prosecutors, digital footprints are nearly impossible to erase completely. But the searches weren't just about murder. They were also about escape. Pamela searched for countries with no extradition treaty with the United States. She searched for how to create new identities abroad. And she searched for remote rental properties in Costa Rica and Belize. This was the smoking gun of premeditation. This was not a sudden emotional breakdown. This was a meticulous plan developed over 12 days. The final piece that sealed her fate came from her phone. Wong recovered deleted text messages between Pamela and a close friend, Carolyn Lambert. In these messages, Pamela had revealed her discovery of the affair. Pamela wrote, "I found messages on Michael's phone. He's sleeping with one from the hospital. My whole life is a lie. I can't let him take the kids from me. I won't let him win." Carolyn responded with concern, suggesting therapy or a lawyer. Pamela's reply, sent just 5 days before the massacre, was terrifying. "He thinks he'll take everything from me, the house, the kids, even my reputation. But I'd rather burn it all down than let him win." And in another message, just 36 hours before the murders, she wrote, "Some problems can't be solved in a courtroom. I need to protect what's mine. And if I can't have them, no one will." Investigators now had everything: the motive, infidelity, and the desire to win the divorce, the premeditation, the internet searches, the method, sedatives, and the hot chocolate. And the cover-up, the self-inflicted wound, and the intruder narrative. The physical evidence came in to support the theory. The prescription sleeping pill bottle in Michael Turpin's name was found in the master bathroom. It was nearly empty, despite being filled with 30 tablets just 2 weeks prior. Pamela's fingerprints were on the bottle. The knives, though cleaned, revealed microscopic traces of blood in the seams between the handles and blades. The DNA matched Michael and the children. More significantly, microscopic examination of the knife handles revealed traces of Pamela's skin cells, consistent with someone gripping the knives tightly while exerting the force necessary for the fatal stab wounds. Even her timeline betrayed her. A neighborhood traffic camera captured Pamela's vehicle briefly leaving and returning to the neighborhood at 4:17 a.m., an unexplained 15-minute trip. Prosecutors believe she was disposing of evidence, possibly bloody clothing that was never found. At the crime scene, the 911 call was placed at 4:32 a.m., suggesting she used the intervening time to stage the scene, create her wound, and contact authorities. Investigators also discovered an escape bag in her master bedroom closet containing her passport, a significant amount of cash, and a secret offshore bank account she had set up in her maiden name. On January 26, 2020, just 3 days after the massacre, Detective Anderson and 4 officers arrived at the hotel where Pamela was staying under police protection. Anderson knocked on the door. When Pamela opened it, he stated calmly, "Pamela Turpin, you are under arrest for the murders of Michael, Olivia, Noah, and Lucas Turpin." Bodycam footage captured her reaction, a fleeting expression of shock, quickly replaced by manufactured indignation. "This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here," she was. Transported to jail, booking officers noted her strange behavior. She was unnervingly calm. Most people are either crying or angry when they come in on murder charges, especially involving children, one officer testified. She was just flat. She asked about shower schedules and whether she could get a different color jumpsuit because orange was her color. A second, formal interview was arranged. This time, it wasn't an interview with a victim. It was an 8-hour interrogation of a killer. Anderson laid the evidence out in front of her, piece by piece. "Pamela, we know the intruder story is a fabrication." He started with the wound. "Our medical examiners have definitively determined your head wound was self-inflicted. The angle, the depth, the characteristics. They're impossible to reconcile with your description of an attack. Pamela looked at the photos. They're wrong. Maybe it happened differently because I was in shock. Then Anderson laid down the printouts of her internet searches. Lethal medications? How to make it look like a home invasion. Her composure began to crack. Anyone could have used my computer, she insisted. But the timestamps of the searches corresponded perfectly with periods when she was home alone. The turning point came when Anderson laid down her own deleted texts. The messages where she wrote, "I won't let him win." For several seconds, Pamela stared at the printouts in silence, the color draining from her face. She realized the depth of the digital recovery. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. "So what if I knew he was cheating?" she asked sharply. "That doesn't make me a killer." That was the shift. She was no longer denying. She was justifying. Anderson moved in skillfully. "Discovering your husband's affair must have been devastating. Anyone would be angry, furious even. Especially after everything you sacrificed for the family." Here, the floodgates opened. "You have no idea what it's like," she said, tears forming for the first time. 15 years I gave him. I put my career on hold for his medical school. I gave him 3 beautiful children. I created the perfect family he always said he wanted. And then he throws it all away for some hospital fling. But Anderson pressed on the most painful point. "What I'm struggling to understand, Pamela, is why did Olivia, Noah, and Lucas have to die? Michael betrayed you, but the children were innocent." Here, Pamela revealed her twisted logic. She whispered, her voice barely audible, "You don't understand. He was going to take them from me. He told me he wanted custody. After everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed. He was going to take my children and play happy family with her." It wasn't a direct confession, but it revealed her distorted perception that killing the children was somehow preferable to losing them in a custody battle. Before her lawyer could stop the interview, Anderson used one last gambit. He wasn't planning to seek full custody, Pamela. He was going to request marriage counseling. He still wanted to try and make things work, for the kids' sake. It was a lie, a strategic ruse. But it hit Pamela like a physical blow. She gasped audibly and covered her mouth. In the seconds before her lawyer burst into the room, Pamela uttered the words that would seal her fate. "It doesn't matter now. Nothing matters now. They're gone and it's done. No one will ever take anything from me again." It was a quasi-confession. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was an act of ultimate control. The trial, which began in September 2020, was a media circus. COVID-19 protocols, plexiglass barriers, and masks. Pamela entered in a conservative navy blue suit, designed to project respectability. The prosecution, led by Assistant DA Sophia Baker, laid out its opening statement. By sunrise the next morning, Baker said all 4 of them would be dead, not at the hand of an intruder, as the defendant initially claimed, but at the hand of the woman who was supposed to protect them above all else. She promised the evidence would show premeditated murder in its most calculated form. The defense, led by Alan Zimmerman, faced a mountain of evidence. They couldn't deny she did it. So, they gambled everything on her state of mind. "The question before you is not whether these deaths occurred," Zimmerman said. "The question is whether Pamela Turpin, at the moment these actions were taken, was capable of understanding the nature and wrongfulness of her conduct." They introduced the theory of dissociative psychosis, a complete mental break. Yes. Pamela Turpin inflicted that wound on herself, Zimmerman admitted. Shocking many, but not as part of a calculated plan to deceive investigators. She did it in the confused aftermath of a dissociative episode, when her fractured mind was desperately trying to create a narrative that could make sense of actions she herself could not remember or see. Comprehend. The defense's strategy was to admit the physical facts but argue she was not mentally responsible. They argued she suffered from undiagnosed narcissistic personality disorder and that the trauma of discovering the affair triggered a catastrophic detachment from reality. They brought in their expert, Dr. Eleanor Hartman, a forensic psychiatrist. Dr. Hartman testified that Pamela suffered from vulnerable subtype narcissistic personality disorder. She claimed the discovery of the affair wasn't just a personal rejection, but an existential threat to her entire identity. She testified that the internet searches, while appearing calculated, were actually fragmented, automatic behaviors, directed by a fractured psyche no longer integrated with normal consciousness or moral reasoning. But the prosecution was ready. They dismantled this theory, piece by piece. Dr. Victor Ramirez, the ME, explained in detail why the wound was self-inflicted. The angle, the depth, the lack of surrounding bruising. All consistent with her own right hand moving toward her head, and completely inconsistent with her narrative. When pressed by the defense, Dr. Ramirez admitted he could not determine her state of mind, only the physical mechanism of the injury. Then came Marcus Wong, the digital forensics expert. He showed the jury the timeline of her searches. At 1:37 a.m. on January 13, her searches radically shift to undetectable poisons and how to make death look natural. This shows a clear progression from discovery to research of murder to planning for escape. The most emotionally devastating testimony came from Dr. Rebecca Palmer, the woman Michael was involved with. She reluctantly confirmed the relationship. Then she provided Michael's final text message, sent 2 days before he was murdered. "I need to end things with Pamela. I'm going to talk to her this weekend about separation and co-parenting." When asked about Michael's intentions regarding custody, her testimony directly contradicted Pamela's alleged motive. Michael loved those children more than anything. He was very clear he wanted shared custody. He said repeatedly that despite their problems, Pamela was a good mother and the children needed both parents. This destroyed the core of Pamela's motive. He wasn't going to take the children from her. She was going to have to share them. And for her narcissism, sharing meant losing. The prosecution brought in their own psychological expert, Dr. Martin Feldman. He demolished the dissociation theory. What the evidence actually shows is a narcissistic personality facing narcissistic injury, Feldman testified. This was not dissociation. It was narcissistic rage and a need to maintain control at all costs. The methodical planning, the digital evidence showing awareness of wrongdoing through deletion attempts, the careful staging of the crime scene, and the creation of a cover story, all demonstrate clear, goal-directed thinking inconsistent with a dissociative state. He added, "In my professional opinion, Pamela Turpin was fully aware of the nature and wrongfulness of her actions when she took the lives of her husband and children. This was revenge." Finally, in a stunning move, Pamela Turpin decided to testify herself. In a soft voice, she described discovering the affair. "It was like the entire world I had built collapsed in an instant." She claimed her memories of searching for murder methods were foggy and dreamlike, that she felt like she was watching someone else use my computer. Her account of the night of the massacre was fragmented. "I remember giving the children hot chocolate. And then nothing clear until I was standing in the bathroom with blood on my hands, not understanding where it came from." She insisted, "I wasn't trying to deceive anyone. I was trying to make sense of something my mind couldn't process. I loved my children more than anything. I would never have hurt them if I had been in my right mind." But prosecutor Sophia Baker was ready. She began softly, "You claim your memories are foggy. Yet you were able to attend marketing meetings at work, make dinner for your family, and participate in your daughter's parent-teacher conference during this same period, all with apparent normal cognition." Then she displayed the text messages to Carolyn. Do these messages sound like someone detached from reality, or someone making a deliberate, vengeful choice? I'd rather burn it all down. If I can't have them, no one will. Are these the words of someone in a dream state, Mrs. Turpin? The final blow came when Baker displayed the crime scene photos of the children. Mrs. Turpin, you've testified you have no clear memory of killing your children. Is that correct? Yes, Pamela whispered. Then, Baker continued, her voice cutting through the silence, how do you explain that each child was killed in order of their age? Olivia first, then Noah, then Lucas. With identical wounds that forensic evidence shows were inflicted while standing in the exact same position relative to each bed. Does this methodical pattern not suggest deliberate, conscious action rather than dissociative confusion? Pamela stared at the photos. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Finally, in a broken voice, I don't know. I don't remember. The jury didn't need any more. After just 11 hours of deliberation, they returned. On the count of murder in the first degree of Michael Turpin, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of murder in the first degree of Olivia Turpin, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of murder in the first degree of Noah Turpin, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of murder in the first degree of Lucas Turpin, how do you find? Guilty. At the sentencing hearing, the victim impact statements were read. Michael's father, Robert Turpin, spoke in a shattered voice. You didn't just take our son. You took our grandchildren, our future, every birthday and holiday and graduation we would have shared. You took every chance we had to see Michael's smile in Olivia's face, his determination in Noah's eyes, his gentleness in Lucas's laugh. We are left with rooms full of wrapped Christmas presents that will never be opened, with photo albums that will never be filled, with an emptiness that can never be filled. When Pamela was given the chance to speak, she stood. I know that nothing I can say will bring back Michael, or Olivia, or Noah, or Lucas. I do not ask for forgiveness because I know I do not deserve it. All I can say is that I failed as a wife, as a mother, and as a human being in the most fundamental way possible. And I will spend every remaining day of my life with the weight of that failure. It was not an admission of guilt, but a statement of failure. Then, it was Judge Ortiz's turn. Mrs. Turpin, in 32 years on the bench, I have presided over many murder trials. But I have never encountered a case that so thoroughly challenges our understanding of maternal instinct and basic humanity. He then delivered the sentence. Not concurrent terms, but consecutive. One for each life she extinguished. 65 years for Michael Turpin. 75 years for Olivia Turpin, age 8. 75 years for Noah Turpin, age 7. 75 years for Lucas Turpin, age 5. Total, 290 years in prison. Then, in that extraordinary moment, the judge leaned forward. The law requires me to maintain judicial temperament. But I would be less than honest if I did not acknowledge that your crimes have tested the limits of that requirement. You betrayed the most fundamental trust in human society, the trust children place in their mother to protect them. Go to hell, Mrs. Turpin. May you spend every day of your 290-year sentence reflecting on the lives you destroyed. Here, for the first time, Pamela Turpin's mask crumbled, her face collapsed, her knees buckled, and it took her attorneys and a court officer to keep her from falling. She was led from the courtroom sobbing, a woman destroyed by her own need for control. Having finally lost it all, in the aftermath, the community struggled to heal. The Turpin home became a temporary memorial. At Austin Memorial Hospital, the Turpin Family Memorial Wing was dedicated in the pediatric department, specializing in childhood trauma. Michael's parents started a foundation in their grandchildren's names to prevent domestic violence. They also established university scholarships in their grandchildren's names. Honoring their unique qualities, Olivia's creativity, Noah's teamwork, and Lucas's curiosity. And Pamela, she serves her sentence at the Mountain View Unit, a maximum security prison. Reports describe her as a model prisoner, meticulously following the rules. A prison psychologist described her as living in an elaborate psychological compartmentalization, rarely speaking of her children and referring to her crimes in passive, detached language. She has created an internal narrative that allows her to function day to day without confronting the full reality of her actions. Detective Nathan Anderson, the man who unraveled her deception, requested a transfer from the homicide division. He confessed to his colleague, Sophia Baker, "I've seen a lot of darkness in this job, but I always believed there were certain lines human beings wouldn't cross. The Turpin case took that belief away from me. I need some distance from that kind of evil." 5 years after the massacre, at a quiet memorial service, 3 cherry trees were planted for Olivia, Noah, and Lucas, with a larger oak tree representing Michael standing beside them. His mother, Patricia Turpin, offered a final eulogy. "Time hasn't diminished our loss, but it has given us perspective on what matters. Michael and our grandchildren lived with love and brought joy to everyone they touched. That love and joy continue through all of you who remember them, not for how they died, but for how beautifully they lived."